Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
And once again, welcome to our home as together we greet this Shabbat. We thank Beth Sanders for her beautiful clarinet prelude that set just a beautiful tone for our service. What a sad and difficult week this has been for our country. More than 50 years after the civil rights legislation of the 1960s made racial segregation and racial inequality illegal, we see clearly and sadly that racism has not gone away. And we have a long way to go before we can live up to the ideal of liberty and justice for all. And there's so much emotion around all this, anger and sadness and frustration and finger pointing in every direction. But we all know in our gut that what happened to George Floyd was not right. That when that police officer had his knee on his neck while his life slowly drained away, he did not see him at that moment as a fellow human being with the most basic of human rights. And we ask ourselves, how could that happen in America in 2020? But of course it did happen. And this kind of abuse is happening, and not just once, but over and over and over again. So tonight, on this Shabbat, we dedicate our service to talking about the theme of social justice, because it's not just an American ideal, it is a Jewish ideal. In fact, it is the commanding voice of the Torah that first brought to the world pronouncements like proclaim liberty throughout the land and tzedek tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. And Jewish teachers throughout the ages like Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched arm in arm with Dr. Martin Luther King, constantly remind us that few are guilty, but all are responsible. Which means we ourselves might not be racist, but if we are not moved to do something, to be a part of the solution that puts an end to the systemic racism that is still very much a part of our society, then we are part of the problem. Our service tonight is abbreviated because we're going to share a recording of a conversation I had yesterday with Dumasani Washington, a good friend, an African-American who is the pastor of a local church, the Congregation of Zion. We do so because I think that more than anything, we need to learn to listen. We need to not just see America as we experience it, but to listen to the voices and to the perceptions of our brown and black brothers and sisters who so very often live a very different reality. So let us continue with our service now as we light the candles for Shabbat. And I hope you have candles at home and that you will light with us as well and bring some of the warmth, some of the light, some of the holiness of Shabbat into your own home.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel
Those of you who can, please rise and join us in the call to worship the Baruch Hu. It was Abraham Joshua Heschel, who I quoted earlier, who famously said, "When I marched in Selma, I felt my feet were praying." And what he meant by that is the work he was doing as he was marching arm in arm with Dr. Martin Luther King was holy work. And that sometimes it's not enough to just pray for freedom or to pray for peace or to pray for wholeness. Sometimes we have to get up and we have to go out and we have to join the march. And if we can't march, then we have to do what we can to work for change. Today, to work for criminal justice reform, and that might mean signing a petition. It might mean calling your elected officials, or it might mean just voting. But we have to do something. We have to get involved. When we pray the Michamocha, we invoke the memory of our ancestors in their march from slavery to freedom. They were marching, they were praying with their feet. And we are reminded anew that that march to freedom we are still on that march, for we live in a world that is waiting still to be redeemed.
Page 2.
Yum bum 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 bye, yum bum bum bim bum, yum bum 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 bye, yum bum bum bim bum, la 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 la, yum bum bum bim bum, la 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 la, yum bum bum bim bum. We come over ba ding ba dum nai, we come over nectar of Kaddish, Dorati Lodon Sefenlem, Dorati Lodon Sefenlem, yum bum 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 bye, yum bum bum bim bum, yum bum 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 bye, yum bum bum bim bum, la 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 la, yum bum bum bim bum, la 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 la, yum bum bum bim bum.
I cried when I saw the front page of the New York Times listing 1,000 names of COVID-19 victims. I cried when I saw the brutal murder of George Floyd on video. I cried when I saw the cities of Minnesota going up in flames. The pain is palpable. Our hearts are broken. All people, black, white, red, yellow, brown, are God's children. One human family united in its desire to make America better for everyone. That requires the right to speak up and protest peacefully, but not violently. Violence moves us backward, turning attention away from the progress we have made and pushing the ultimate goal we seek farther into the future. Violence makes us forget that diversity is America's strength, making it more difficult to rejoice in our similarities and respect our differences. In Jewish tradition, we have a saying, when truth is spoken and justice is done, then peace is established. Pirkei Avot. For truth to be spoken, each of us must learn to listen, opening our ears to hear one another's truth and our hearts to understand it. For justice to be done, it must exist for everyone, rich and poor alike, those of every religion, race, culture, and background, those with power and those without. Only then can we find the wholeness that true peace represents. Written by Rabbi Sally Prezan, the first female rabbi ordained by a seminary. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm. Ashivenu, Adonai Eloheinu. Ashivenu, Leshalom. Lehamidenu, Shomreinu Lefayim. Ufros Aleinu, Sukkot Shalom Lecha. Ashkifenu, Adonai Eloheinu. Ashkifenu, understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from Understanding among us, let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms.
I share the reading on page 4. Holy One of Blessing, grant us the will to stand firm in the face of evil and hostility, not to be silent or afraid, to work diligently and faithfully to banish wickedness from the earth. Holy One of Blessing, grant us the courage and resolve to speak when there is hatred, to act when there is confusion, to join with others in building a world of safety, understanding, and acceptance. Because there is hate, dear God, help us heal our fractured and broken world. Because there is fear, dear God, grant courage and faith to those in need. Because there is pain, dear God, bring healing to the shattered and wounded. Because there is hope, dear God, teach us to be a force for justice and kindness. Because there is love, dear God, help us to be a beacon of light and compassion. As it is written, be strong and let your heart have courage. Depart from evil, do good, seek peace, and pursue it. We continue now with a prayer for healing, our Misha Berach. All that we've just mentioned that needs healing in our world, and our own family and friends who are ailing at this time and need our prayers for a refuah shlema, for a full and speedy healing. Tonight, we ask you to yourselves say it aloud in your homes, the name of your family members and your friends. And then we'll sing together, Misha Berach.
Words are on page 3.
We add to the names that we all mentioned aloud, all of us who are in need, especially at this fractured time. The need of prayers for strength and good health and healing. Refuat HaNefesh and Refuat HaGuf for healing of mind and body and spirit. Baruch Atah Adonai Rofeh HaCholim. Blessed are you, O God, who heals the sick.
Amen.
We remember with love those of our loved ones who are no longer with us physically, but whom we carry in our hearts and in our minds. And so, in a very real way, they continue to bless and to carry us. We pay tribute to the memory of our loved ones who are in the Shloshim, the 30-day period, or the Shana, the 1-year period of mourning. We remember with love Joe Delgado, Marianne Lipkin, Phyllis Janoff, Ted Kalo, Ingrid Epstein, Ronald Mendlin, Diane Ginn, Darylyn Halpern, Bill Schwartz, Sue Solomon, Joan Freer Thor, Florence Guasdoff, Dennis Willens, John Guerin, Bill Long, Leonard Colbert, Mel Halpern, Andy Heisler, Clay Utterback, Richard Ripken, Archie English, Carol Blumenthal, Linda Sue Morgan Ray, Jerry Yeeses, Pablo Carmona Cruz, and Oren Kabaker. And also we say Yiskor Elohim. We remember with love Barbara Navarrete. Our hearts go out to Wendy Weiss and Paul Cervelli. Barbara was Noah's honorary grandmother, and a blessing to him and the family. And we remember also at this time and pay tribute to the memory of these loved ones who have a yortzeit, the anniversary of their death sometime in the week ahead. Mia Meisel, Betty Jean Krieger, Fred Bramer, Gideon Feldman, Jenny Senderov, Dorothy Boyza, Jacob Levine, Sam Zeiden, Pearl Sontag, Emma Van, Eileen Jones, Max Bosek, Helen Chadnick, George Lackman, Joe Sweet, Benjamin Slicker, George M. Rosen, Barnett Shapiro, and Kopel Klebansky. Zichronam Livracha. May all their memories be a blessing. And we add to these remembrances all those who have died in senseless acts of violence at the hands of police. Way too many. As we remember as well those who have succumbed to COVID-19, and of course the 6 million who perished in the Holocaust, leaving no one to remember them. We take all these loved ones into our hearts as we remember them and pay honor to their memory with Mourner's Kaddish. If you can, please rise as we join together.
Page 5.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, B'yalma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayachon v'yomechon, uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam ulomei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalo, shemei dekudesha b'richu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran b'yalma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Osei shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May God grant peace to those who mourn and comfort all the bereaved among us. will come, and let it begin with me. We need peace, and let it begin with me. Oh, my own life is all I can hope to control. Oh, let my life be lived for the good of my soul. Let it bring peace, sweet peace. Peace will come, and let it begin with me. Shalom, Shalom Yavo, Sheat Hiliti, Shalom, Shalom Yavo, Sheat Hiliti.
Try with us.
Oh, my own life is all I can hope to control. Oh, let my life be lived for the good of my soul. Let it bring peace, sweet peace. Peace will come, and let it begin with me. Shalom, 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 Sheat Hiliti, Shalom, 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 Sheat Hiliti. Oh, my own life is all I can hope to control. Oh, let my life be lived for the good of my soul. Let it bring peace, sweet peace. Peace will come, and let it begin with me. Peace will come, peace will come, peace will come, and let it begin with me. Peace will come, peace will come, peace will come, and let it begin with me. Peace will come, peace will come, peace will come, and let it begin with me. What an important prayer for us to sing and to pray for this week, to pray for peace. Peace in the streets of our cities, and wholeness and healing for our country. So we are now going to share with you the conversation I had yesterday with Dumasani Washington. It's going to jump at several moments. It's obviously edited because our conversation actually lasted for an hour and 20 minutes. It was a wonderful conversation, but that, of course, is too much for us to share in the context of our service. So we've taken out what we thought are some of the most interesting moments and put it together to about 28 minutes. So listen carefully to his words and let us learn. And Ari's reminding me that we will put online, and it'll be available. We'll send out the link in the week ahead so that you can listen to the entire conversation.
Dumasani.
Yes, sir. Hey, Rabbi.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy today to sit and visit with me and to have this conversation. And what everyone is saying is a watershed moment in the history of our nation. And I'm sorry we have to do it this way on Zoom. If things were different, you and I would be sitting together, in a cafe, or I would have you at Temple on the Bima speaking to the whole congregation. But this is the next best thing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You and I have a lot in common. We are both fathers and husbands. We both are clergy leading congregations here in Stockton. We both have a great love for music, and music plays a huge role in the services that we lead in our congregations.
Yes, sir.
And we value each other's friendship
Yes, sir.
deeply, and we've worked together, in many important moments having to do with Israel. Oh, Israel is the other thing I forgot to mention.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
You not only are a pastor here of your congregation, but you now run the national staff of KUFI, Christians United for Israel. But our life experience, I'm assuming, is surely different due to the color of our skin. And I want to open the conversation and have you reflect on that as you see it.
Well, Rabbi, first of all, again, I thank you and echo everything that you said. I appreciate our friendship, our working relationship over the years, the times we've been able to connect. You're right, we have all those things in common. And I very much appreciate Temple Israel. The people there, they've been so supportive and warm, and we appreciate that very, very much. It's difficult for me to see what's happening here now, specifically in terms of the murder of George Floyd, the protest, the unrest, the politics, the media, all of those things. It's always difficult for me to not see it through a very specific lens, not just as an African American, but it's funny how as we get older, we reflect more on our roots, more on our foundation. And so though I grew up in California, very much a California kid, I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, in the segregated South in the late 1960s. And so my parents moved out here when I was a child, but we had a lot of conversations about Arkansas, about life, and not so much about the racism and the segregation. We definitely talked about that. But they were more anecdotal, the way that most parents would talk to their kids. When I was young, I did this, and this happened in high school, this happened, whatever. And so that was my lens. That became my lens. And so like my father, whose father was a sharecropper, and as we know in terms of American history, that's one step above slave. My dad talked to me about the farm. And he would talk to me about, he loved being on the farm. My dad was a farmer. I mean, everything, it was a huge, of course, it was a white landowner. And of course, the sharecropper worked the land, and there were other workers that would work with them. Everything from corn to cotton to slopping pigs and feeding cows and all those things. So I had those conversations with my dad and different ones with my mom. My mom was more of the city person in North Little Rock, Arkansas. My dad was in the rural. Plus, my dad was a musician too, so he sang, so all that stuff was connected. And my mom talked to me about North Little Rock, Arkansas, Central High School that was desegregated. She was older; she was already past high school, but she knew the family. So this was like real life discussions, not like history book or history channel. It's like, and I knew these people, conversations. And so my worldview was being shaped as a Black American, obviously in ways I could have never anticipated. So that when we come to this time now, and I'll give a little couple of the anecdotes and we can kind of give the people listening what I mean. I see it through a lens that's both in an emotional, obviously, if I'm seeing injustice, particularly if it appears that it is being directed towards my people, if it's police brutality or unfair sentencing or the criminal justice system in general, those types of things. That definitely is an emotional thing for me. And then I also see it through more of an analytical lens based on, again, what they would say. They had kind of the way I got information from them, I juxtaposed it all the time. So give you a quick story. So for my dad, he was around 10 years old. He told me this story. And lots of different stories. This one has been on my mind for a reason. The white landowner or foreman, whoever it was, had come by one day and they were out in the field. And wherever they were at this point, he drives his pickup truck to my dad and his dad. And whatever was going on, the guy in the truck, the white guy in the truck, he's giving my grandfather what for. He's whatever happened, whatever was going on, he's just very demeaning, very disrespectful, all that. And if you know, of course, those who are listening, Jim Crow South, you can't speak back to a white person. You can't, you could die just for looking at someone the wrong way. So my grandfather's just kind of head kind of bowed because you can't even get eye contact. So he's just kind of taking it. And my dad's 10 years old, right? So he's watching all of this. He's watching it, and he's young enough to not know all of the protocols in terms of Jim Crow, but definitely old enough to know what the heck's going on. He knows this guy is just really coming for his dad. At some point, my dad climbs up to the door, so those pickups are off the thing. He jumps up at the window the guy's leaning out of, gets in his face. Hey, you, I don't like the way you're talking to my daddy. And I'm old enough to know what this means too. So I'm sitting there listening. My dad said, well, he didn't die because he's here talking to me. So and I said, Daddy, what happened? He said, nothing. He said, the guy was so stunned. He looked at me, he looked at my dad, looked at me, and he drove away. He said, I was too young to realize that we both could have died that day. But something in me said, you are not going to talk to my father like that. Well, when I see what my big mouth is, I see it's in my DNA. So I remember that story. And so my mom, Rabbi, when she talked about her experiences, she talked about it with such passion and with love. So, and I have to say this and give you some context here. She, like virtually every Black student in Arkansas, went to Scipio A. Jones High School, Scipio Africanus Jones, named after a famous African-American. Of course, it was segregation, so that was the only school that you'd go to in almost all of Arkansas. Like wherever you lived in Arkansas, if you're gonna go to high school as a Black person, if you're gonna go to like a public high school, you'd have to come there. So my mom told the story, Rabbi, with a very different, not different, it would be different in terms of what I would learn in the textbooks. So in the textbooks, I would learn, here was segregation, here's the white only entrance to this, here's the Black, the version of that, the drinking fountains, all of those things. My mom didn't talk about those things as much. She talked about with great pride this school where all these Black students went. Sounded like something from Different World, this TV show that was on. And she talked about their science program and their music program and everything. And my mom, and this was probably the most formative thing when it came to how I see race here. She said to me, Dumisani, the whole issue of segregation and desegregation was much more, and I'm paraphrasing now, nuanced than what you hear. She said there were serious, deep debates within the Black community about whether there should be desegregation and then how, meaning this. There were two, they became two, he said they would have these debates in the basements of the Baptist churches. They have, dinner, whatever like that, and they have these raging debates. And so now you have the civil rights movement, both of the 50s and of course in the 60s. And there was different feelings about Dr. King, not so much the person, but about what was going on. There are different opinions. So you have a lot of debating that's going on. And she said one of the central debates was that you had two camps. One camp was like, yes, we need to desegregate. We need to be able to go to school with white children, and we need to be able to have access. And the other school of thought was, no, what we need is more of an equal distribution of the funding in terms of the tax dollars, because the Black schools have the cheaper this, cheaper that type of thing. And we need to be able to have our own schools. So it was a very divided community in that, Rabbi, there was not a consensus on desegregation is what needs to happen. And the people who were on the other side were the ones who said, once we desegregate, we will lose control of, granted, smaller, but our schools and our teachers. So she said, and here's the thing, this is what she said to me. What they warned about, unfortunately, was true. She said, once we desegregated, she said, this is what the racist white people did. They intentionally fired the best Black teachers, kept the least performing ones, almost as if to mock us. Place them in some sort of subservient positions because they're angry. You got to remember that, and again, please, for people listening to me, please don't think that I'm taking a position against desegregation. I'm telling you the discussion that was actually being had. This is how I'm formed in my mind, so you'll know how I see what's going on today. So she was saying, sure enough, the best teachers. So there was like this crying. There was like this. Yes, we know we're under oppression. We're under no delusions that this whole separate but equal thing is not true. At the same time, we want some autonomy, because once we get integrated into the broader white community, particularly still here in the Jim Crow South, or wherever there's places where there's still a lot of racism, the legislation is not going to change the hearts and minds of these people. And we're going to be stuck being under their thumb almost even more in certain instances. And she said to me, Scipio A. Jones High School was closed down, but it sat there like a mausoleum for decades. So they would drive by it and remember what it was. Now, remember,
Have you ever felt the sting of racism personally?
I have, yes, Rabbi. There have been times that from growing up, obviously growing up here in California, there's been things that I've been called a nigger. Thankfully, not by a teacher or something like that, a classmate, the type of thing. I've had people want to fight me because I was Black a couple of times in school. A few of them, yeah. For me, I'm not, that's where my parents kick in as well. I told some of the young people, I was telling them that what my parents taught us about racism was that it was essentially two things, boiled down to two things. Number one, it exists. Number two, it can't stop you.
You mentioned more than once that Jews seem to get it. We have so much in common, and we've both been the subjects of persecution throughout history. And, the Jewish community prides itself on its involvement in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Jewish leaders like Abraham Joshua Heschel and Rabbi Maurice Eisendrath, who was the president of the UAHC, the Umbrella Organization of Reform Judaism, they marched with Dr. King in Selma. There are, dozens of pictures that you can find and speeches that they gave. And Kivi Kaplan, I don't know if you know that name, he was instrumental in forming the NAACP, an American Jew.
Yes.
We're proud of all of that.
Yes, sir.
But has the Jewish community done enough? And how might we be better partners in moving forward?
Obviously, this goes without saying, Rabbi, but I can only speak for everything's been my perspective. I know that that the Black community is not a monolith any more than the Jewish community. My Jewish friends say to me, Dumisani, you have 3 Jews in the room, you get 5 opinions. I said, that's funny because Black people are the same way. There's not always consensus. So I can only answer that the best of my ability. I know that's what you're asking for. And my answer would be yes. I believe that our Jewish brothers and sisters, not just historically, but even in this time, I'm talking about even modern. I mean, let's go just back to Ferguson 7 years ago to now. Not only has the Jewish community been there in the marches still, and the whole Black Lives Matter, I've seen plenty of Jewish, I work in the pro-Israel space, so I know, unfortunately, the negative and the positive of some of those movements. As you know, Rabbi, here you have a justice movement, and now you have anti-Semitism within that movement, and you're having to kind of weed that out. So I'm there, I get it. And oftentimes the people who are most adamant about weeding that out and keeping it about the Black community is my Jewish brothers and sisters. They're there. They're at the marches. They're at the events and everything. And I talk to them. And again, so for those who are listening, I have Jewish friends on the left and right. I have Republican Jewish friends, Democrat Jewish friends, and I mean, there's Zionists. The Jewish friends that I have that are not pro-Israel. We're not as close, but it's not like we fight. I get it. They're their own person. I'm saying all that in context. Yes. I believe that our Jewish brothers and sisters have been there as present. My son wrote an article several months ago for Times of Israel. I'm recommending, just hit me, about this very topic. And I recommend, as a matter of fact, Rabbi, I'll send you the link to it. And then if you want to share with the congregation, you can, about this very topic. And he went back historically, the Ferguson at that point. This hasn't happened yet, obviously, with what's going on this particular moment. We know this is an ongoing issue in terms of police brutality, that type of thing. And he had just kind of documented how, not just in the past, but in the modern times. And he even talked about the Black Lives Matter movement. And not only do I feel that our Jewish brothers and sisters have been there, I believe that in this moment, and I can only imagine that it's somewhat frustrating for my very active Jewish brothers and sisters, we are in a moment in time, Rabbi. Remember the debate I told you about? My mama told me in the basements of the Baptist churches, they were talking about, we're having that debate again 50-something years later, but it's renewed. And there's not so much, should we desegregate? No, or not that in terms of the literal part of it, but it really is what we say in the Christian world, a come to Jesus moment. I really like okay, let's really wrap our heads around this. What's happening? I see that conversation being had more so than I ever have in my lifetime. And to that degree, our Jewish brothers and sisters can continue to be supportive, continue to be a voice, share it with their congregations. As my rabbi friends, they do. You all tell them, hey, we're praying, we're going to be active. We need to be vigilant. We need to be aware of what's happening. I see that happening across the country. But that's a smaller percentage of what needs to happen. Our community, like never before, needs to have this conversation about media, its role, its influence, effective change. Like that's why I gave an example for. I'll give you a quick example. So Killer Mike. He's a very well-known rapper, probably closer to my age, from Atlanta, Georgia. He's part of one of the mainstays of the hip hop community, and he said something very interesting. This was during the Ferguson dust up, and he said, "We need to have a national conversation, policing and what's happening in these communities." And Rabbi, he said something that shocked some people. I just know a little bit about him. I kind of followed him. Really pragmatic guy. He said, Rabbi, and I almost quote, "We're not having the same problem in Atlanta." Now, some people took issue with that. But he was saying was that I'm watching, he started naming certain cities, the Fergusons, the Chicagos, the more hot spots in which there's been much more of this cop black violent type of thing. Everything from shooting unarmed black people to the stop and frisk stuff that we saw happen in New York. And he says, we don't have the problem here. He even said this, I'll send you the link. I'm paraphrasing now. Maybe we can help, meaning we, Atlanta and Atlanta Police Force, can help with some of these others. And I looked at my wife and I said, this is a moment in time. His message wasn't all cops are bad, white cops particularly. His message was, yes, we have a serious problem in our criminal justice system, but some areas are more well-heeled than others. Maybe, and the reason why I commended him was that, okay, you're analyzing the problem. It's beyond emotion, beyond the rage. He's saying, here's something that we can do. If Atlanta's police, now those of you listening, you might be saying, Atlanta, because I know when he said it on social media, there are people who came from, what do you mean, Killer Mike? No, my dad was, this happened to me in Atlanta. So they began to tell stories, and what they didn't understand was that they may have their individual stories. What Mike was saying was on a broader scale. At least for him, I'm not from Atlanta. He was saying, we haven't had this type of drama like we've seen that's been playing out in Ferguson and other places. We used to back in the day, but it's been much better. I was saying to my wife, here's a moment in time, because this is a more nuanced conversation that's internal for the Black community, saying, how do we help what's going in Oakland? How do we practically help what's going on in LA? And I say that to say, rabbis, for our Jewish brothers and sisters, they have to, and you are, let us have that conversation, because it speaks really more to how we're going to go forward from here, more so than the allies that we have around us. It's almost like, Rabbi, you coming to me and say, Dumisani, we want to help Zion achieve the building of your new music school. What can we help do? So, well, I mean, I have to have a list of stuff. Well, we have materials, we have this, that, and the other. So I can't really respond to you effectively until I can tell you, Rabbi, here's what Temple Israel can do.
Is there a message that you would like to convey to our community?
Rabbi, I'll talk for another hour. So let me end it for you. Two things I want to say. First of all, I want to say again, and as sincerely as I can, I want to, on behalf of my community, thank my Jewish brothers and sisters from the past to now. Your activism, your heart, your conscience. Like, as Rabbi Heschel said when they did the Alabama march, that we felt like our feet were praying, that you all have maintained that. And along with that, this is one, and 1B would be, you have not always been reciprocated. I know that there's two sides to a story. Some of the tensions between the Black and Jewish community goes back to Dr. King even talked about. He talked about in one of his last speech when he was with the Rabbinical Assembly with that day. The rabbis were asking him about some of the anti-Semitism that they saw because it was a newer thing they'd never seen it before. And he talked about some of the tensions in the cities, whether it's a Jewish landlord or a store owner, that type of thing. He said, yes, but at the same time, there are bad Italian landlords and there's bad Negro landlords. He said, going, it's not just a Jewish thing. He said, but that stigma gets there. And he said and the Negro experiences the Jew and two disparate things. He might see something that happened in a city that's not fair to him. And at the same time, he sees rabbis marching with him. So he said he has to reconcile that. Dr. King had already done, but he was explaining to the rabbis that thing. So I'm saying that to say, I don't think, that's why my son's article is so important. Our Jewish brothers and sisters have not always been shown the appreciation. That's 1B. Thank you, but also we've not always been appreciative. And again, I get that there's different sides to every story, but from what I've seen, we've not always been appreciative for how, not just historically, but even now. I have Black pastors in Chicago and the Jewish rabbis are right there with them, helping, doing all kinds. I see that all in LA. I see it all over the country. And I don't think that we're always vocal enough, not just in terms of Israel, and that's important, but in terms of our Jewish brothers and sisters. And the number 2, Rabbi, I would say, my message to our Jewish brothers and sisters would be to even more so, listen to the voices. Do what you've always been doing. Listen to those Black voices and hear them so that you are even more aware of what's happening. They might be religious voices. They might be politicians. They might be Republicans. They might be Democrats, independents. I would encourage you, Jewish brothers and sisters, to listen to them all the more. In the Black community, with the level of discourse that's happening, which is unprecedented to me, I think that you're going to get more of a moving forward. If Dr. King's words before he was killed are ever going to be realized when he said, I want you to know that we as a people will get to the promised land. I think we're probably closer to that now than ever before. Not that we're going to experience a nirvana, but I think that we're going to experience here going forward a Black community by and large that is stronger, even more aware, and less susceptible to many of the manipulations that we talked about here today. I think, and I hope that that's where we're going. If that's the case, it will be said that our Jewish brothers and sisters played a huge role. One of the things that we love is, Rabbi, in the Black church tradition, we're always talking about Moses and the Israelites and all those stories to this day, not just during the slave day, to the day. You hear Black preacher preaching, next thing he knows about the Red Sea and why? Because those themes of freedom are still there. I believe that the most inspirational things that our Jewish brothers and sisters have left up, not just the Black community, but the world, is you have taught the world what it means to move forward. The Mizrahi Jews expelled from North Africa and the Middle East. The Jewish brothers and sisters who survived the Holocaust. persecutions, for millennia. If we're going to have an oppression Olympics, which I'm not trying to be funny, they would win the gold medal every single time, hands down, okay? With all the genocides and things that have happened. Yet we see Jewish men and women, Mizrahi, Ashkenazi, Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews in Israel suffering a great deal of frustration. But here's Panina Timona Shata, one of the parliament members. That story can only be told in Israel. Our Jewish brothers and sisters have told the world, and specifically the Black community, you've shown the world what it means to move forward, what it means to lose everything and move forward. I really, truly believe and am hopeful that the Black community will absorb that. Because again, like you, we've gone through hell and high water, slavery, Jim Crow, all of those things. But there's, over the last 50 plus years, there's been a real wandering in the wilderness. There's been a real, as bad as those things were, the dismantling of our families like never before has been just amazing. Like our Jewish brothers and sisters, the strength came from our family, our faith in God, and our families have been the most impacted. I believe that those conversations, which need to be had, are being had. And it will be said that it was the Jewish community partnering with the African American community that so helped that. The same way I believe that Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington was almost like a seed being planted. As powerful as it was at that time, it was a picture of what was to come. And I believe that we're going to see that, Rabbi. So I would say to my Jewish brothers and sisters, listen to the conversation. Have them talk to you. Talk to them. Even if you feel like you have nothing in common politically with them, listen to what they're saying. And I think it's going to inform it even more going forward.
Do you have hope for the future in the wake of all this?
I do, Rabbi. I temper it by saying I think that it's like, I hear Dr. King's voice in my head. We have some difficult days ahead. I think that this George Floyd thing and the Breonna Taylor, the whole, I think that, not to sound discouraging, I think it's going to get a little uglier and nastier, but I believe almost necessarily so before it gets better. But I do believe that on the other side of this, Rabbi, is a real reconciling within the community. If we can do it within the community, I believe that that's going to translate better outside the community. So I do have hope, Rabbi. So there's a lot of conversations, I'll have my Jewish friends know this. There's a lot of conversations we haven't had within our community, Jewish brothers. There's some things that have been just not discussed, just kind of like ignored. And we all know that life doesn't treat those things very well. At some point, those things are going to come back. That's another thing that's happening in the Black community. Some things that we haven't really talked about, that we're being forced to talk about now. And that's part of the pain of it. Part of the pain, if they can understand that, as much of the pain of racism or an innocent Black man being killed, as painful as that is, what deepens that pain is that there's some other issues in the community that we haven't really been talking about that are now front and center. So that part of it is a good thing because it has to happen. So I am hopeful, Rabbi, I really am.
Words alone could not express my thanks to you for all that you do and for spending this time with me today and sharing this message. I think it's so important for us to listen and to learn from you. And I'm hopeful for the future also. And I think if we're going to reach the promised land, the only way we're going to do it is side by side, hand in hand.
Yes, sir.
Walk in that path together. And
Absolutely.
I hope you know that I consider you my brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And I love you. And you are a blessing to my life and to our community. And I hope you have my number on speed dial if you ever need me.
I'm going to need you, Rabbi, and I the same, Rabbi. We feel the exact same way, and we appreciate you all so much. So knowing that Rabbi and Temple Israel, and yes, sir. So no, I have your number, I have your email, all of that. Absolutely. So yes, sir. We'll stay connected, sir.
My love to Valerie and to your whole family, and be well. Let's get together soon.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you, Rabbi.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Now. Bye-bye.
I thank Dumisani again for sharing those thoughts and reflections with us. And I hope that it sparks questions and that it invites us to continue listening and to continue talking not only amongst ourselves, but with our friends, with our neighbors, and especially with our African American and with all people of color, to understand their experience, to get out of our own small vision of what our society is and to try to live it, walking in their shoes. We conclude our service this evening with one more beautiful song. This one, a song again of hope, a song that calls for us to change our hearts, a song that calls for us to get involved in making a change in our world. The composer of this song is not Jewish, it's Carrie Newcomer, and the title is If Not Now, Tell Me When. That line comes right from Jewish tradition, from Rabbi Hillel, who said, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I am for myself alone, what am I? Ve'im lo akshav matai, and if not now, then when? Once you get the knack and you hear the melody, we invite you to join us in singing.
Page 7, if you have the C door.
sorrow and trouble in this land. I see sorrow and trouble in this land. Although there will be struggle, we'll make the change we can. If not now, tell me when. If not now, tell me when. If not now, tell me when. We may never see this moment or place and time again. If not now, tell me when.
I may never see the promise.
I may never see the promised land. I may never see the promised land. And yet we'll take the journey. We'll walk it hand in hand. If not now, tell me when. If not now, tell me when. If not now, tell me when. We may never see this moment or place in time again. If not now, tell me when. We'll work until it's done. Every daughter, every son, every soul that ever longed for something better, something brighter. It will take a change of heart for this to mend. It will take a change of heart for this to mend. But miracles do happen, every shining now and then. If not now, tell me when.
If not now,
If not now, tell me when. If not now, tell me when. We may never see this moment or place and time again. If not now, tell me when.
miracles.
And miracles do happen, every shining now and then. If not now, tell me when. If not now, tell me when. If not now, tell me when.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Have a good and restful Shabbat, and take this message of peace and reconciliation and opening our hearts with you through Shabbat and into the week. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Shabbat Shalom.